Welcome to Vendetta Sports Media. This is Eight Sided Freaks, and today we are here with quite a bit to talk about, actually. We've got UFC Abu Dhabi to recap. That was last week's card, headlined by Cory, Sandhagen, and Umar Nurmagomedov. We're not going to dive too deep into this upcoming card because if you've looked at this week's upcoming card, it's pretty shit. There are not very many interesting fights. If you want more information on that, we will eventually have the preview and best bets up on the website. You can read that for information on that card, but we're not going to talk too much about it today on the podcast. But what we will talk about instead is some fight bookings, because we have like 10 or 11 big fights that have been announced in the last week. The big ones are UFC 308. That's, I believe they announced 6 fights for that. And then we have some other fights, a couple fight night main events. A couple other fights that are going to go down on fight nights or on pay-per-view. So depending on how much time we have left after this UFC Abu Dhabi breakdown, we will go into that. All right, so UFC Abu Dhabi. Let's start it off right at the top. Cory Sandhagen versus Umar Nurmagomedov. Umar goes out there, picks up a pretty wide unanimous decision on the scorecards. I believe 2 judges gave him 49-46. Another judge gave him a 50-45. But all rounds were close. It was a much more competitive fight than the scorecards will lead you to believe. Jerry, what'd you make of Umar going out there and picking up a win over a guy in Sandhagen who is ranked number 2 and has been on a great win streak as of late?
I mean, I think this is kind of something we could have predicted, the style of what Umar came out and did. We know Sandhagen is a really dangerous guy on his feet. Umar gets 5 takedowns, definitely looked more dominant, got into the more dominant positions on the ground. Couldn't get enough done on the finish to get a finish there, but Cory Sandhagen, I think Umar may have even said it after, was so much tougher on the ground than he expected. And, I mean, we saw him. He knows how to do, and he's improved his ground game significantly, that he threw a little bit of a wrench into maybe what Umar was doing. But at the end of the day, Umar is still undefeated, and his wrestling is so strong, and he proved that in this one. It's kind of – I mean, I picked Cory Sandhagen hoping that he'd kind of get a lucky knockout, but Umar is legit, and his ground game is really good, and I think he can only get better at this point.
Yeah, I have some positives to say about both guys. One of the things that going into this fight, I think the biggest questions was how will each guy respond when the fight is not in their ideal place. So when we're grappling, how does Sandhagen respond? When we're striking, how does Umar respond? And ultimately, both guys, I think, overperformed expectations in that part of the fight. Cory's defensive grappling looked pretty solid to me. Umar's striking looked much, much, much better than I expected. I think part of Umar's striking success was because Cory was a little hesitant on the feet. I think Cory threw like 180 significant strikes, something around that number, which is, in terms of pure volume, is much, much, much lower than fights like his Song Yadong fight. That was only a 4-round fight. Fights like his Vera fight, that was a 5-round fight that also had grappling. So it was a low output for him, and that allowed Umar to kind of let his hands go a little bit more than you may expect. But regardless, Umar was able to compete on the feet with Cory, which is impressive, and he was able to win rounds, even if you would like to see Cory throw a little more. So I thought it was a good performance from both fighters. I don't think Sandhagen will, fall out of, I don't think this is going to start a trend of him losing fights or anything like that. But for Umar, I think he proved he belongs, right? I don't think he deserved the fight with Cory. 0 ranked wins, getting the number 2 guy. I just think it was too soon for that. But once you go out and win that fight, well, now there's no more critiques. Once you pick up the win, you deserve to fight for the title, and you deserve to be in there with the highest ranked guy. So lots of respect for Umar's performance. And I assume on your side of things, no objections to him fighting for the title?
Nope, none at all. Give him the winner of Merab and Sean O'Malley. Don't know quite who's going to come out of that. Kind of depends on where the fight goes and if Sean can keep Merab at bay and all that. We'll touch on that when it comes down for UFC 306 in more detail, but Umar's going to be tough for both of them. I'm going to just throw that out there. It's another one. We've seen Khabib. We've seen Islam. Umar's another one coming through. These Dagestanis know what they're doing, especially when it gets to title time.
Yeah, and I think that trio of fights with O'Malley, Merab, and Umar will be interesting because they're all three very unique fighters. Mm-hmm. The roster just doesn't have a lot of guys like them, so that creates a lot of opportunity for some interesting matchups.
Oh, absolutely, and it's going to be interesting because I think it's a little tough on the Cory Sandhagen side of things. He dropped 2 spots, just fell below Petr Yan, and then obviously Umar jumped over him. So I don't quite know what's next for him. Coming off a loss, maybe it is a guy like Deiveson Figueiredo, who we'll touch on in a second, who's on his move up the division. Or maybe it's a guy like, I guess you can't give him Cheeto Vera at this point with him losing, but someone like that, or rerun it back with Petr Yan.
Yeah. For Cory, I think that's a good point because just looking at this, like, weight class, Cory's fought a lot of these guys. Yeah. And there's a lot of guys who are ranked above him that he probably shouldn't be fighting right now. I do think that you could potentially run him out there against the loser of O'Malley and Merab. I do think that is a decent option as well. But Figueiredo is right there as well. To spoil what I'm going to say later, I do think they should do Figgy and Petr Yan. So that would be my pick for those two, so that I'm not really looking at Sandhagen for those guys at the moment.
All right, that's very fair. The other one who, I don't know if this would necessarily be the right fight, but I know he has a fight coming up. Jose Aldo, if he wants to make a move up this weight class and in this division again, he goes out and beats, who's he fighting?
Mario Bautista.
Yeah, if he comes out and beats Mario Bautista, why not give him a shot with Cory Sandhagen? If he beats Sandhagen, he proves he can still compete at the highest level in this division, and maybe it keeps him around for a little longer.
Yeah, you won't hear any disagreement from me when you're throwing around ways to book Sandhagen and Aldo. Yeah. So that's a great fight and doesn't take much convincing for me.
No.
All right, the co-main event on this card, we had Shara Magomedov go out there against Michal Oleksiejczuk. This was 2 strikers who can't grapple fighting each other. And Shara was the one landing the better shots. Michal forward pressure the whole entire fight, but Magomedov landing his kicks, landing some counters. It was a good fight. It wasn't anything crazy. But Shara gets another win here in the UFC, which I believe is his third win. Brener, what'd you make of his performance? Because he is a guy that, fighting in the co-main event's a big spot, and he's a guy a lot of people have their eyes on.
Yeah, and this has been an interesting fight card for him. Because I want to say he's had multiple different guys that he's been scheduled to fight on this, or was this? It might have been one of his last 2 fights. I thought it was this one.
The last time he fought, he had a bunch of different opponents. This one,
it was that one.
Was put together on short notice, though.
All right, so either way, yeah, I got those 2 mixed up. But he looked good. He looked like he did what he had to do against a guy. He had no fear of. He even got taken down a couple times and still managed to find his way back to the feet pretty easily and keep it up there. So I can't tell how good he really is, but I'm sure we're going to see him get some interesting fights coming up. And this was kind of the filler in for the co-main of Nick Diaz and Vicente Luque, which honestly, I know the scorecards were very one-sided in this, but it might have been a little more intriguing or interesting in the actual octagon than a Diaz and Luque fight.
Yeah. And similar to what you said, I don't know how good Shara is. I have a pretty decent suspicion that he's going to go out there eventually and get out grappled very badly. Mm-hmm. He really cannot grapple at all. But, the UFC gave him the worst grappler in the division, and Michal Oleksiejczuk. So who's to say he doesn't fight a guy with respectable grappling for 2 years? Like, there's a chance he just dodges every single competent grappler that will go out there and grapple him, just from a matchmaking perspective. So you really can't predict that. So it will be interesting to watch because I think he's entertaining. I think he'll bring fans to the sport, but I'm just not sold on him as a ranked fighter, let alone, a highly ranked one.
Yeah, I think it's more of the glamour. Maybe glamour is not the right word, but that side of thing of he has the one eye, looks like a pirate, kind of talks the talk, and obviously the UFC loves their Dagestani fighters, so it's all that little stuff that I could see him. I don't think he'd be. I was thinking Alex Pereira's path where he didn't have to fight a single grappler on his way, but there's a reason they were doing that. I could see them if they want to really market him, get him against guys who can't grapple, get him guys who will go and stand and strike with him, and see if he can put him away like Alex did.
Yeah. One last thing I'll add on this fight is he called out Nick Diaz, which is just shameless. What are we doing here? We don't need to see that fight. Let the old men fight each other and before they retire, and we can move on with our days. So
especially
that was crazy.
Especially when Shara will probably want to fight in Abu Dhabi or somewhere in the Middle East because he's never even fought stateside. He's fought China, Russia, Thailand, and then the Middle East. So, and we know Nick has no interest in going over, or at least it seems like that. So, I don't know. I don't get the point in calling him out there.
Yeah, I agree. Pretty pointless. All right. The next fight on the card was, in terms of importance, Marlon Vera versus Deiveson Figueiredo. This was a fight between two guys. I think they were 4-6 entering the octagon as far as the rankings are concerned. Cheeto looking to bounce back from losing his most recent fight, which was for the title. Figueiredo 2-0 in the weight class, looking to climb up the rankings even further. Figueiredo was the one who goes out there, picks up the victory. He wins round 1 with some offensive wrestling. He wins round 3 practically by dropping Cheeto. Or not practically. He dropped Cheeto, and then he practically emptied the gas tank after that, just with follow-up. So not only did he drop Cheeto, which is ridiculous because Cheeto is known for his absurd chin and never being knocked out and never being dropped. So he goes out there, drops Cheeto, and then follows up with a ton of offensive strikes, lands some really good ones. I think this was a very strong performance from Figgy against the guy in Cheeto who is much bigger than him and very, very dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. Figgy looked really good, and I know Cheeto even mentioned it after the fight that maybe he rushed himself a little bit quickly after that fight with Sean O'Malley for the belt. Nonetheless, we know Cheeto Vera is a tough son of a gun. You said it, never been knocked down, never been knocked out until this fight, got knocked down. I thought Figueiredo was going to get that finish, but you can't quite finish Cheeto Vera ever. He's just one of those tough guys. So props to him for surviving it, but Figueiredo, I had concerns when he first moved up about his power translating over and up a division. His power's still there. He can still rock people. It seems like he's more powerful now than he was when he was fighting at a lower division. And maybe this is because this is his more natural division, it seems. There was all the weight cut issues at times in the flyweight division. He seems healthier. He seems more aggressive. He seems like he can actually has a much stronger gas tank now as well and can keep going and going. I know this is only a 3-round fight, but he looks like a much improved fighter than when he was the champion in the lower division.
Yeah, and I don't know if he'll ever be champ at 135. If you were to force me to say yes or no, I'd probably say no. But what I will say is, theoretically, his game of when he was at 125, he was the guy who was hitting people like a truck and knocking them out. And he was just getting in insane grappling scrambles and submitting them. That's really what he did. And that wasn't going to be as sustainable at 135 against guys who are much bigger. You just can't go out there and bully a guy like Cheeto. He went out there, he still knocked him down, but at 125, it felt like Figueiredo was a bully. And I'm not saying that in like a negative sense, but he went out there, got in your face and threw and was bigger and more powerful. And now, even in that fight, Cheeto might have been the more powerful striker. He just didn't find the shot. And I think that, and even in his last fight with Garbrandt, you can't really go out there and trade and get in crazy exchanges with Garbrandt like you can with some of those flyweights. Not because he couldn't knock Garbrandt out, but because Garbrandt can knock him out. So I think he adapted well to the additional risk of fighting at 135 and the way he changed his style, more offensive grappling, went out there, got a few minutes of control time without jumping guillotines, without rolling free heel hooks, without doing all this crazy stuff, and it won him the round. So I think he made a lot of tangible improvements that he needed to make to win fights at 135. Like I said, I wouldn't predict him to be the weight class's champion, but 3-0 at 36, which the cutoff point, which is pretty well established for these really light weight classes, is 35. He's 36, getting high level wins. So lots of credit to Figgy for this run. I already said that I wanted to see Figgy and Jan. I would have loved to see that fight next for those two guys. Is your head in the same place for Figgy's future, or are you looking somewhere else for him?
I mean, I mentioned when I was talking about Cory Sandhagen, I like the idea of Sandhagen and Figueiredo, but I'm not opposed to Figueiredo and Petr Yan at all. I think both of those will be very interesting fights, good fights. I think Sandhagen might pose a little more of an issue to Figueiredo just from the size point of view, because compared to Petr Yan, but either way, it's one of those things that I could see Figueiredo. Either of those. Give me either of those fights, honestly. I'm here for it. But
yeah, that is the nice thing about the top of the 135-pound division. You randomly pick two names, and you're like, all right, that's a good fight. Like, it is a fairly easy division to matchmake just because there's so many exciting fighters. And as long as they haven't fought before, it's usually a pretty good matchup. Go ahead.
That's one of the fun things with Figueiredo is him moving up a division. He hasn't fought any of these guys. So it's all fresh names. It's all fresh matches. And that's why I think we're here for anything related to him.
Yeah, and one more name I want to throw out that we haven't really discussed as far as the bantamweights go is Henry Cejudo. I don't know if Cejudo's fighting again, but I wouldn't mind seeing him in there with a Petr Yan. I think him and Figueiredo have trained together and have a close relationship, but I think Cejudo could also work his way into a fight with a guy like Jan or maybe a Sandhagen, depending on where exactly he wants to go with his career. But it's at least worth noting because he is sitting there ranked number 6 and don't really know what he's doing with his career at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at the last two guys he's fought, Merab, and then before that it was Aljo for the belt. I don't see him winning the division or winning the belt in this division anymore. So I really don't know. I'd rather see these top guys fight each other and Cejudo be, unfortunately, the guy who misses out. Or maybe it's Cejudo and Chito Vera now. They're both coming off back-to-back losses. That was one that probably intrigues me more than some of these others.
Yep, that's a good call. And they were booked to fight. They were originally booked to fight when Chito fought Pedro Munoz, I believe, on the O'Malley and Sterling card. They were originally booked to fight each other. Winner was going to fight for the title. Cejudo had to pull out with an injury. So there is past history there, and getting that resolved would make some sense. All right. Next fight, Tony Ferguson versus Michael Chiesa. This was, I will say, this kind of, in a way, it went better than I think it could have. Because we're seeing Tony Ferguson fight, and on the list of things that could have happened, he could have been knocked out cold. Mm-hmm. He could have been choked out and didn't tap. He could have been put in an armbar, not tap, break his arm. He could have been beat up over the course of 3 rounds. He went out there, didn't really get hit that much, got his back taken, fairly quick tap to the rear naked choke. Didn't really get hurt in there. I mean, for a guy that the expectations are in, as low as you can make them, I don't think this was a terrible way for Tony to go out in the UFC in terms of just his looking purely from his own health.
Yeah. I agree with you. It's so tough to see, but like I personally think he should have retired multiple fights ago. But hey, that happens.
Yeah, and
I was
like
just,
you
I
said, he's. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
was to say I agree with you. He only Chiesa landed 4 strikes. It wasn't like he was getting beat heavy. I think the fight went 3 2/3 minutes or 3.5 minutes, something like that. It was pretty straightforward as soon as he got to the ground that Tony was going to lose, and he's not the same guy he used to be. Clearly, he's lost 8 in a row, which isn't that now a UFC record?
Yeah.
So hey, if he goes out, he went out making a record, not one you necessarily want, but what a story. 12 in a row, wins, 8 in a row losses. I think it's time, Tony.
Yeah. I think it was like you said. I think it was time a couple fights ago, but now it is definitely time. His retirement was a little weird, but I mean it's Tony Ferguson, so I wasn't necessarily expecting, the most standard retirement. He leaves one glove in the octagon and takes one because basically saying, if you call me, I'm still good to go. I got one. Which I think is a unique sentiment. And you can tell he clearly still wants to fight. And in his post-fight interview, he kind of, was like, well, if they don't want me to fight in the UFC, I still somewhere they'll take me. It was kind of what he was alluding to. And it's weird because it's like, it felt almost like the UFC was saying goodbye to Tony rather than a typical retirement where the fighter says goodbye to MMA. It was just the UFC saying goodbye to Tony. So I kind of think we're going to see Tony fight in some, I don't know if it's the PFL. I don't know if it's bare knuckle. I don't know if it's karate combat. I don't know where it is. But I think we're going to see Tony compete again. I hope for Tony's sake, if any of those organizations bring him in, well, first of all, I'd say, man, maybe don't. But if they do, I hope they do something with him that is similar to what the UFC did, giving him Chiesa, a guy who won't really hurt him, which I don't really have much faith in because we watched the PFL sign Marlon, run him out there 2 times in 4 months, and he got finished in both fights. So everyone likes to act like the PFL is the nicest organization out there, but I watched Marlon, who had been finished in like a handful of consecutive fights, go get finished by leg kicks, and then he was back out there 8 weeks later after getting finished by leg kicks, and he proceeded to get knocked out in that fight. So, if they sign Tony, I'm sure they'll give him Shane Burgos or Clay Collard, and he'll go out there and collect extra brain damage that no one wants to see. But, who knows at this point? I guess we'll have to watch and see what happens.
Yeah, I was going to say PFL has a card coming up in October that they just announced that if they want to just throw another former UFC big name guy in and say, oh, we have all the former UFC fighters, why not? It's Ngannou against the heavyweight champion and then Chris Cyborg against the women's featherweight champion.
Yeah, let's add Yoel Romero and Tony Ferguson to the card and really get these sales up.
Oh, yeah. Big money coming in the smart cage.
Yeah. So as far as Chiesa goes, Chiesa did his job. I'm not overly impressed, really. It was, he went out there and got the job done. And for all the jokes about, Chiesa, can't defend a Darce choke, he didn't go out there and get Darce choke. So credit to him. Is there anything particular that you want to see next for Chiesa? Because me personally, I don't really have a name. He called up Colby, and I was like, all right. I think Colby, we got to figure something out with him. But you're not skipping all the way up to number 4 in the rankings, Michael. Do you have anything that really stands out to you?
I mean, if you're going to give him a ranked fighter, I don't even know if a ranked fighter's worth it. Vicente Luque was already going to fight an old guy or in Nick Diaz. Give him a guy who's a little younger, coming off a win. Maybe that, but otherwise, no. I have no names, nothing else for him. Chiesa, we'll see what happens. I don't even think he gets a ranked fight at all.
Yeah, I could care less if he gets a ranked fight too.
Yeah.
I don't really have any names for Chiesa. I don't know if they're gonna make him fight a prospect or I don't know what they're gonna do with Chiesa. And to be honest, I don't really care, unfortunately. He's just another guy who's kind of past his
say
past
about
his prime a little bit. Yeah. All right. Mackenzie Dern versus Loopy Godinez. Mackenzie goes out there, picks up a 29-28 victory. Very, very, very close fight. I think Dern's a good scorecard. 1-3 Dern. But if that fight got scored for Loopy, I wouldn't have been like, oh, what? This is crazy. I think it was pretty close. A lot of striking exchanges. I think Dern probably hit a little harder. But every time Loopy landed, Dern gets hit, and, she looks kind of awkward when she gets punched in the face because her chin's up in the air like this. And my biggest takeaway from this fight is no one has taught Mackenzie Dern how to land takedowns. When she landed takedowns in this fight, she had success, but somehow nobody has taken one of the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners in the world, let alone the UFC, and taught them how to get the fight to the ground, which just
I don't get it. It'd be like Francis Ngannou when he was in the UFC. He has his power. You know what he's going to go do. Let's just not have him stand up. Let's have him shoot for takedowns the entire time. I don't get it. It makes no sense because if she gets someone on the ground, she is lethal. There's a reason she has 7 submissions in her 9 of her 14 wins. So one of those things, good for her to get back in the win column after back-to-back losses. But I'm surprised to see that she dropped in the rankings after this.
Yeah. One more thing I will say. Also, if she can just get takedowns and we don't even need submissions. If he can just spend more time in top position, it's less time you spend getting punched in the face.
Yep.
It is kind of bewildering, and I couldn't even tell you what the thought process is. The dropping her below Hebos in the rankings, Hebos can't even pick a division, so she's ranked in 2 divisions, and I think it's because they don't know what division she's in.
And that's what's even funnier is she went up in the strawweight division, but went down a spot in the flyweight division. So I don't know what's happening. We gotta love the UFC website.
Yeah, and the rankings, and even the rankings on the women's side, they care even less about. It's just there, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, the most passionate I've seen Dana about any rankings was John Jones being thrown 3rd, which, John Jones has fought once in the last 4 years. Personally, that makes sense. He was not very pleased about that, if you guys didn't see that.
No, he was not. He was not. And my other thing about these pound-for-pound rankings that I think people are just not in tune with what the definition of pound-for-pound is. I don't even want to get it. That's a whole nother thing for another episode. Because
we have stuff to talk about this time. This is what we need to talk about next time we have 2 terrible cards back-to-back weeks.
Yeah, because I've got I could let go a 15-minute rant on the pound-for-pound rankings, but we're going to keep that one in the holster and move on to the last fight on the UFC Abu Dhabi main card. Oh, sorry. For those who have not been in the know, my computer camera doesn't work anymore, so I've been on the phone, and that's a product of being on the phone right there. So, my bad. Anyways, Joel Alvarez versus Elves Brener. Last fight on the UFC Abu Dhabi main card. This was a great performance from Joel Alvarez. I mean, Joel Alvarez, a guy who's 6'3", 77-inch reach, has a ton of talent. But Alvarez was kind of always in this group of guys that's is he going to put it all together? I've said this about other fighters, but at some point we just got to put all these tools together. Well, he went out there and put them together, and that was a good performance against Elves Brener. Went out there, outstruck him for 3 rounds, patient, landed big shots, let his hands go, landed some kicks, and then in the 3rd round just landed some shots, got to the clinch, started to unload with some knees, and he goes out there, gets the finish with knees. And I like to see a fighter finish in that scenario too, because he's up 2 rounds, could have coasted to a victory, goes out there, gets the finish. Thought it was a solid performance from Joel Alvarez. What'd you make of the fight?
I mean, I only saw the 3rd round, so really only saw the finish in that, but he looked very good. Don't know why, but I picked Elvis Brener on our predictions. Kind of thought maybe, hey, he's the underdog. I'll throw a sprinkling underdog in there. But those knees were nasty, and I'm pretty sure that he was the first. Alvarez became the first person to ever finish Elvis Brener, so that's even more impressive. Good win, 2 in a row. I mean, you look at his last 5 fights, or since he's coming to the UFC, he lost his first fight, then he lost to Arman Sarukian, which seems like a weird fight. Now that we see where Sarukian's going and fighting for the belt next, and that was only 2 years ago. So he's finally looks like he's kind of getting it together. I'd like to see him fight more often because he has been only fighting once a year. But no complaints. Solid fight overall from what I saw.
Last thing I'll add, before this fight, I said, hey, 2 guys who are making runs in the lightweight division, winner's going to put themselves in a good spot. So not only did Alvarez win, but he won in pretty impressive fashion. So I think that's a good way to frame that is what it looked like before. Winner was going to put himself in a good spot. And he did that, and he did it in impressive fashion. So. I
also just want to bounce one more thing off that you said earlier. Yeah, he could have just sat back and waited for a decision. It looked like he was up. Sounds like he was up 2 rounds to none, but he didn't. And that's part of what makes him look intriguing to me. He has 21 wins, all by finishes. Only gone to the decision once. Either submitting, knocking someone out, or getting knocked out. Those are the kind of fighters we love watching, and kind of makes it more enjoyable as a prospect to see you because you never know what you're going to get.
Yep, I'm with you. Now, when we're talking about enjoyable fights, we'll stop there because we're getting ready to talk about UFC Vegas. I'm not even sure what number this is, to be honest. But the headline, Marcin Tybura versus Sergey Spivak. And those are the only ranked fighters on the card. The card in it as a whole doesn't have very many fights that are.
I want to say, at least according to the UFC website, there's 2 more ranked fights, both on the women's side of things.
Oh, good call. Yana Santos versus Chelsea Chandler. They are ranked, but it's also like a situation of who really cares about the women's bantamweight division? And I'm not even trying to be disrespectful towards the women's bantamweight division. I don't think the UFC cares about the women's bantamweight division, to be completely honest with you. So when the UFC doesn't care about the division, it makes it hard for me to care about the division, especially when we're talking about the lower portion of the rankings and not even the, Kayla Harrisons, the Peñas. We're not even talking about them. We're talking about the bottom of the barrel of that division. So my apologies for forgetting. They were ranked fighters. One other fighter on here, or the other ranked fight, Carl Hossa versus Penny Kianzad, also women's bantamweight division. So,
and I want to just say on that one, the rankings are 8 and 11. There are 3 women tied for 8th in the division. So you're fighting 1 spot ahead of you if you're Mackenzie.
Also, the UFC cares so little about this division that they have the number 8 ranked fighter fighting the number 11 ranked fighter on the prelims, and they have the number 12 ranked fighter fighting the number 14 ranked fighter on the main card. Like, that in itself makes absolutely no sense. So it shows you how much the UFC cares.
UFC math at its finest.
Yep. Chris Gutierrez as well, I will shout out because he was formerly ranked. He was ranked very recently. Problem is Gutierrez, his opponent, who was supposed to be Javid Basharat, pulled out. Now he's fighting a guy who was supposed to fight on Contender Series. So this has been a long intro to this card, but my main point here is there anything that stands out to you, whether it's entertainment or a specific fighter, anything that stands out on this card that kind of separates itself from the rest of the fights?
I mean, not particularly. It's kind of a weird card. I mean, even just looking at it, I clicked on, was it Nikolai Varentenikov?
Yep.
And it's on the UFC website. His status is not fighting. So don't know what that's about. He doesn't have a flag next to him. Just seems like one of those cards that they kind of just looked for whoever they could find and threw it together. Maybe we've seen these kind of bad cards on paper give us some bangers. People trying to make a name for themselves, but I don't know. That's kind of all I'm hoping for is we get to see something crazy happen somewhere. And even the main event, Tybura Spivak, it'll be an entertaining fight, but could also be just two guys laying on top of each other for 25 minutes.
Yeah. So here's what I'm looking at for this card. Could care less about the main event. A little behind the scenes. When this fight got booked, I sent it to Jerry and Anthony, and I said, please, Lord, this better not be a main event. And then they said, no, guys, don't worry. It won't be the main event. That's what the UFC said. They said, it's not the main event. I mean, we would never do that. And here we are, the Wednesday before fight week, and it's the main event. So never mind about that. So that's my opinion on that fight. There are some fights that I think could be entertaining. Danny Barlow versus Nikolai Veretnikov. Danny Barlow was my favorite fighter from last year's Dana White Contender Series. Contender Series starts next Tuesday. So we got Contender Series on the road, not like Contender Series. And I should have published my rankings. So the way the Contender Series posts work that I rate the recaps for, I rank every fighter based on how much I like them 1 through 5. And then I made my own personal rankings afterwards, and I kind of updated it throughout the year. Barlow was my favorite fighter from this most recent season. Number 1 out of the 50 or so, 50 fighters they signed. So I really like Danny Barlow, like his skills a lot. Went up there, knocked out Josh Quinlan in his UFC debut with the broken arm. You couldn't tell he had a broken arm because he was out there whooping on him with a broken arm. So a lot of respect for Danny Barlow. Danny, left-handed God. Don't get hit by his left hand because it does send you to God. And listen, to be honest, I don't know much about this Nikolai Veretnikov. Haven't done tape on him yet. I'll learn about him before I write the preview. But he hasn't fought in the UFC before. Lost on Contender Series in 2021. Ripped off 3 straight wins since. So not much to know about him. But Barlow is the guy in this card that I think is must watch. I will also say some shout-outs to Yusuf Zalal and Jarno Aarons. Zalal's most recent fight, he looked really good. He went out there, picked up a lot of wins on the regional scene to get back to the UFC. It looks great in his return to the UFC. And Chepe Mariscal versus Damon Jackson. Chepe is a guy who is typically entertaining. Damon's a guy who maybe it's going to be entertaining, maybe it's not. So I'll at least say there's some potential there. I'm not going to get too excited about it, but I will shout out them because they have put on scraps in the past. So that's what I'm looking at for UFC Vegas. Once again, I still haven't looked up the number to it, but UFC Fight Night, Tybura versus Spivak. So that's a generous recap. We gave it about 7-8 minutes, which is much more than it deserved.
Yeah, that's kind of more than I expected us to talk about. There we have it.
All right, let's talk about something much more interesting now. UFC 308, they announced this main card and a prelim fight this week. Main event, Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway. Jerry, I'll send it over to you. What do you make of this fight getting booked, and what do you make of it being in Abu Dhabi?
About damn time that we had it booked at least. I would have loved to see it in Spain. Would have loved to see it at the Sphere. Abu Dhabi, I guess, is okay. As I said to you before the show, I'm very curious to see because we had UFC 304 in London or in England. Pay-per-view was made to be for the American side of things. Fight main card was like 3 or 4 in the morning in England, and something tells me we're not going to have the same situation in Abu Dhabi. Something about not piss off them down there, and lose a bunch of money. So don't know why, but feeling. That's my only critique of this entire card is I think it's going to be that way.
Yeah. I agree with you. I do think they're going to, put it right, 3 p.m. Abu Dhabi, or 3 p.m. Eastern time, primetime Abu Dhabi. Not a doubt about it. And I think this is the best fight the UFC could make right now. I think it should have headlined the Sphere. I've seen people say you can't really have Ilia Topuria, who's from Spain, headline the Mexican Independence Day card. I get that, but I will also say it is now sponsored by Riyadh season. So like they're having, it's now Ringed season, Noche UFC at the Sphere. So do they really care that much? It doesn't, just based off the actions, they don't really care that much. So giving them the best fight possible in the sport, I don't think is necessarily a negative. But with that being said, I'll take this fight in Abu Dhabi, in Salt Lake City, in New York, Chicago, Detroit, LA, Miami.
Give it to me in a Walmart parking lot for all I care.
Yeah, exactly.
And I will be watching. It doesn't matter what day of the week, what place they're in. I'm pumped.
Yep, I'm with you. I don't really have much to add here. I feel like this one was pretty standard. Like, yes, it was finally announced. So that's great. Fairly straight up, fairly simple. So let's move on to the next one, which I think gives us a little bit more to break down. Robert Whittaker versus Khamzat Chimaev has been rebooked for the co-main event. What do you make of them going right back to this fight? Do you think it takes place? Do you think they should have given Whittaker someone else? What do you make of this? Because I know this has been heavily discussed about this fight being rebooked.
This separates Robert Whittaker from Sean Strickland, in my opinion. Robert Whittaker came out, did what he had to do, and rightfully deserves a title shot after Izzy and Dreysus du Plessis, in my opinion. Instead of saying, no, I'm not going to fight anybody unless I fight for the belt like Sean Strickland is, he's going out and running it back with Khamzat Chimaev. With the Chimaev side of things, you can never know if this fight's actually going to happen until he's walking into the octagon. We've seen crazier things happen every single time. It seems like something's going on behind the scenes. Fingers crossed that this does happen. And I mean, going back to what I was just saying, if Bobby Knuckles comes out and wins this, I don't care what Sean Strickland thinks or says. He's not getting that next title shot. You can't be inactive when this guy's going and fighting. Meant to fight somebody, take someone else on short notice, wins that with ease, then comes out and runs it back with that guy, beats him. It's a no-doubter. So I like this move by Robert Whittaker a lot.
Yeah, and I think for Whittaker to get a title shot, he has to be aggressive and take chances like this. Because I don't think the UFC is overly interested in seeing him fight Whittaker, seeing Whittaker fight Adesanya or du Plessis again. Mm-hmm. We've seen the Adesanya fight twice. We have seen the du Plessis fight once, and it was fairly one-sided. But what you can do is make yourself undeniable. That was Max Holloway's motto during, while he was beating guys like Yair and like Arnold Allen. He said, I want to make myself undeniable. I get that I've lost the Volk however many times, but I mean, if I keep winning fights, they can't prevent me from fighting for the title again. So there are things you can do to make yourself undeniable and get back to the title picture. So that's what he's trying to do, and that's what he has to do. It's a lot more effective than sitting around and waiting. The one thing I will say is I think Sean Strickland has an ace up his sleeve, and that's if Adesanya wins, I think Adesanya calls him out, and they do a storyline of the Adesanya kind of revenge tour. I believe that's what that turns into fairly quickly. If du Plessis wins, I don't know where they're going to go. I really don't. So, but with that being said, I think this is a smart matchup, and I think on the flip side, if Chimaev beats Whittaker, he gets a title shot too. So I don't think it's one-sided in saying the winner of this should get a title shot. I think the same should go for Chimaev, even if he has struggled to make it to the octagon and has struggled to compete often. You earn something, you get it.
Yeah, I think they'd also wouldn't mind the UFC if Khamzat wins. Personally, I would say give it Sean Strickland and Khamzat Chimaev, but I think they could very easily just kind of be like, yeah, push him up, depending on who wins. If Dreysus du Plessis beats Izzy and Khamzat beats Whittaker, that's the fight to make. So it's kind of sorts itself out one way or another, because you did make a good point. If Izzy wins, he will likely call out Sean Strickland because he doesn't need a third fight with Robert Whittaker.
Yep. And if Chimaev, I guess that this Izzy's call out will happen before this fight goes down, so it makes it a little bit harder to do the call out for them anyway. So, all right, next fight on the card: Sandhagen versus Alexander Volkov. This is a rematch of a 5-round fight that wasn't particularly exciting, but it was an impressive performance from Gane, where he went out there, outstruck Volkov from distance for a majority of the fight. Low volume, but Gane did enough to win. They're running this back over the course of 3 rounds. Volkov coming off an impressive victory. Gane, isn't fighting in Paris. They're sending him to Abu Dhabi instead. I've just been so intrigued with what they're doing with Gane over the course of, the last year or so. Since he's fought John, really. But what do you make of this matchup? Because I feel like this was just such an interesting one that I don't think I really saw coming.
No, I didn't either. I think, honestly, they might be punishing Cyril Gane by making him fight. Not in Paris and against – nothing against Alexander Volkov, but Cyril Gane keeps saying how he wants to fight for the belt and go up and up and up. And now he's fighting – what's Volkov ranked?
I believe he's like 3. I believe he is very highly ranked.
So he is high ranked then. So that makes a little bit more sense then. But God, I would love to see Alexander Volkov come out and take him down, submit him, finish him, knock him out, whatever it is. Cyril Gane's he's one of those fighters that I like his style when he started out, and I've just grown to dislike him over the time personally because he just doesn't seem to want to fight anyone unless he's fighting for the belt. I wish he'd fought Tom Aspinall, but that didn't happen. So, it should be an interesting fight. I think it'll be better than the first one because it will be 3 rounds, and it's a big win for whoever gets this win. As a step in the right way because we don't know what's going to happen with Tom or with John Jones and Stipe. They could both retire. That would leave Tom Aspinall ready to fight the winner of this. So I think both have to come out and look at this as a title eliminator.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a massive fight. It's hard to say exactly, what the winner is going to get because, what happens if John and Stipe fight, who wins, who retires. Maybe they both retire and the winner just walks right into a title fight with Tom. Like that is a real possibility. But maybe the winner stays and fights Tom and, and maybe this fighter, the winner doesn't get that big opportunity right away. It is really interesting. But I will say, I do think this is hilarious because I have a post on Vendetta Sports Media. Got a post on the site about how Gane just got a lesson in fight promotion. I believe that's the title of the post. And it's basically about how we fumbled the Aspinall fight, and then the Aspinall ended up fighting for the interim belt. So I think it is justice that he's got to work back to that spot after he fumbled a big fight with Aspinall pretty badly. So it is what it is, but I think this will – for a card that this is going to be right in the middle of the main card, like it's a pretty good card, I'd say so.
Oh, yeah.
All right. This next fight also gives us a decent amount to discuss. First, I just want to touch on the fight itself, and then I want to get your thoughts on Pereira because this fight, I think, kind of influences what he's doing as the champion. But we have Magomedov Ankalaev versus Alexander Rakic. A lot of people just assumed the title fight was going to go to Magomedov Ankalaev, but he instead has to earn it against Alexander Rakic, who is coming off a loss to Yuri Prochazka. What? All right, I'll just throw this one over to you. What are your thoughts on this? Because I think this was maybe the announcement of this group that surprised me the most.
Agreed. And we were saying that Volkov and Cyril Gane being announced was kind of surprising, but I think it was less so because I just assumed Ankalaev was going to fight Alex for the belt. That's where this fight, honestly, I don't really care about this fight all that much. I don't care for what's happening. I think the winner should get the next title shot, but I thought Ankalaev was already going to get the next title shot. So there's that. To me, it doesn't play much into it, but it makes it interesting to see, like you said earlier, what's happening with Alex Pereira. I'm really wondering now, after I saw this, the first thing that came to my mind was, are they looking at him to go up and fight Tom Aspinall? Because there's no reason. He said he wants to fight again this year. Alex Pereira did. Or early next year. And this was the fight that I thought was going to happen. So now I'm like, and it's what? October, late October to January or February even. That's still a quick turnaround for Ankalaev at the rate he's fighting, or even Rakic at the rate he's fighting. I think something big is coming for Alex Pereira, and I do think it's going to involve moving up a division.
All right, fair enough. And I mean, I haven't really been high on the idea of Pereira moving up, but that doesn't mean it won't happen.
I'm not high on it either. I don't think he's any of the top guys in the heavyweight division. I just think that's something that there's enough money there that that's something the UFC might want instead of him fighting in Ankalaev, or maybe even they're waiting to see if Yuri and Jamal didn't fight recently. No. I was gonna say maybe see what happens if those two guys fight instead and run that back. But
yeah, and it's tough because if you look at the rest of this division, number one, you've got Yuri Prohaska. That's the fight's not happening for the title.
No.
Then you've got Magomedov, who we just discussed, fighting Rakic. Then you've got Hill, who I don't really think they're going to give Hill a rematch against Pereira. And maybe you could make the case he deserved one, or maybe he should have got one, but their booking of him to originally fight at 303 showed otherwise, that they disagreed with that thought process. And then he got hurt. Jan Blachowicz, I would be shocked if he got it. Like a 41-year-old coming off shoulder surgery. I think like if they're giving it to Blachowicz, I think it's like very much like we want Pereira to knock him out type.
And just off that, just on the Jan Blachowicz, that was the last fight he had was Alex Pereira, and he lost by a split decision there. So it's
and Pereira's fought 3 times since.
Yep.
So, and then you get your back to Rakic. Well, so if he wins, maybe. Then now you're looking at Ozdemir, Krylov, Roundtree, who's suspended, Johnny Walker, Carlos Holberg. I won't even say any more names because it's already got ridiculous through that stretch of names. So, long story short, I have no idea what they're doing with Pereira. Maybe they're going to ice him until January, and maybe he doesn't get to fight one more time this year. Maybe they're going to ice him till March. So I think that would also be a possibility.
It is. And I mean, the thing with Rakic is like, does Rakic really deserve a title shot if he wins this fight?
It's a good point.
He's just been knocked out, and one of them was a knee injury against Jan Blachowicz. Then he gets finished by Yuri Prohaska right after. So he's lost 2 in a row. His last 2 wins were Thiago Santos and Anthony Smith. Before that, he lost to Volkan Ozdemir.
Well, he passed the Anthony Smith test, so I think he should get a title shot.
At this rate, if we really want Alex to fight again, just throw Anthony Smith out there. Let's get it all done with. I've said it before, but God, it's this division continues to be a mess.
Yeah,
and
I'm with you.
Some interesting guys. We are in desperate need of a young prospect to come into this division. I just don't see any.
They all lose to Anthony Smith.
Exactly. The issue. We need Anthony Smith to retire so we can actually get some guys coming up here.
Yeah. I don't really have much else to add. I think, like you said, this division is a mess. I don't think the UFC is absolved of fault. I think that their matchmaking sometimes just is bewildering and adds to the issues. So some of it falls on the fighters for being, who they are. So it's a mess of a division, and I say we move on to what appears to be a banger.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
One more thing that I'm just going to throw out there just because for shits. Israel Adesanya comes out, finishes Dreysus du Plessis, looks good. Instead of calling out Sean Strickland, he says he wants their 3rd fight with Alex at light heavyweight. Would you be okay with that? Would you oppose that?
I would oppose that. Will the UFC do it? Maybe.
Let's see. It's the same thing. I could see them with like him going up and fighting Tom Aspinall. Do it just because they can, not because they should.
Good way to put it. It's a good way to put it. All right. Next fight on the card: Lerone Murphy versus Danny Gay. Banger. Fair enough. Great matchmaking.
Yeah. Yep.
I would have loved to see Danny Gay on the Sphere card like he asked for, because that card needs more fights, and Danny Gay could have been a useful addition to that pay-per-view main card that's looking awful weak after the top 3 fights. Regardless, for a pay-per-view opener, Danny Gay has been entertaining his entire career. Lerone Murphy looked tremendous against Edson Barbosa. And these two are going to go out there and strike, and we're going to see who's the better striker over the course of 3 rounds. I mean, it's sensational matchmaking. Going to be a great fight. I don't have much else to say.
No, you pretty much summed it all up. It's going to be a war. I'm excited. Dan Ige showed what he can do, showed the heart he has in that last fight with Diego Lopez on hours' notice. Leroy Murphy, another English fighter, so I always enjoy watching them fight. And he's a very entertaining one as well that looks to go for knockouts and either gets a knockout win or wins by decision. He's yet to lose in his career, so I'm here for that fight.
All right. Last UFC 308, this is going to be a prelim fight, but it is a ranked fight. Jeff Neal versus RDA. Did not see this one coming.
No.
I don't know if I like it. I don't know if I don't like it. I haven't really
I'm confused.
my opinion yet. It is confusing. I will say that. I mean, I'll take it, I guess. I mean, RDA is hopping between lightweight and welterweight. Now he's back at welterweight. We'll see what happens, I guess.
Yeah. Pretty much. If he wins, awesome. If Jeff Neal wins, awesome. I don't think either are making a run towards that welterweight title, but hey, why not? Maybe this does turn into a banger and very well could.
Yep. Gotcha. I don't have much else to add. That one was
I'll also say this is good namesake for the final prelim. If you're trying to capture like that casual audience a bit, this is one that two recognizable enough names that have had fun fights before. So,
yeah, Jeff Neal has been in consistently fun fights, even in fights that he has lost. So I agree with you on that. All right, let's move over to just some fight bookings that are not on UFC 308. So just some recapping on some other fights. We have this one was wild because we have Jared Cannonier taking on Kyle Brawlho on August 24th. So in the UFC schedule, we have this card that we are talking about. And then we have Israel Adesanya versus Dricus Duplessis. Or excuse me, when I say this card we're talking about, Spivak versus Tybura. That wasn't very clear. Then we roll into Duplessis versus Adesanya in UFC 305. And then the week after, we have Cannonier versus Brawlho. So this was made on about a month's notice. And this is going to be the main event. And this card is it's like barely put together. It's not. Bizarre. What's that?
It's a very bizarre card. And it lost the Kopylov and Bruno Ferreira fight. That was the one I was excited for when I remember seeing it. But I don't know about this card. It's weird.
In the UFC, when you click on the card, it doesn't even show you the names on the card. It just sends you to how to buy tickets. They don't even want to tell you who's on the card. So, which we could find out on Tapology. But I looked earlier, and it's like this card is barely put together. It looks like they just needed a main event. Cannonier, Brawlho both said yes. But with that being said, what do you make of this fight being put together to headline on 3 weeks' notice?
I guess they really needed something. But hey, I'm fine with seeing Jared Cannonier be a main event. I'm fine with watching him fight again. But Kyle Brawlho, I don't know. This fight just seems weird to me. And why not, though? I mean, give the up-and-coming prospect a little bit of a shot. I want to say at least up-and-coming. He is 31, but undefeated in the UFC. His only loss was his second ever professional fight. So why not? Why not give him a shot at a guy higher ranked? And if he gets a win, that you got a whole nother new contender in here. I feel bad for Jared Cannonier in this division. He is so talented and so good at what he does, but he's just been in the air of the Izzy Adesanya, Robert Whittaker's. Just there's always been tougher guys around him. Still think he also might have beat Sean Strickland, or he did beat Sean.
He did beat Sean. Don't even get me started on that fight because he beat Sean, and then Sean won the belt and got a whole new bunch of fans that all like to claim that Sean won that fight, and I doubt half of them have even seen the fight, let alone scored it objectively. Anyways, it's tough for Cannonier because these guys at middleweight, a lot of them don't fight. Like, and the Imavov fight went bad. If we're not running back the Imavov fight, his options are really limited. When was the last time Marvin Vettori fought?
Years.
You know what I mean? Yeah. They booked Brendan Allen versus Imavov, so we can't get Brendan Allen. Paulo Costa, like, that's a great fight, but you're just like, Paulo Costa's not taking a fight on 3 weeks, and if he does, he might not show up. Jack Hermanson, how often does he fight? Who knows what the hell Roman Dolidze is doing? Chimaev, who you never know what he's doing. And now the next guy in the ranking is Kyle Braujo. So I just think this is such a wacky, wacky division. And, you know, I don't hate seeing Braujo get a big opportunity. I do think he's very skilled. I think it's interesting that it's Cannonier to give it to him. I don't know who's going to win this fight. I'm kind of just confused. But in terms of headlining guys on crappy cards, I'll take Cannonier over Spivak, and I'll take Cannonier versus anybody in the division over Spivak and Tebera. So I'm not going to complain too much. Like I said, it's wonky matchmaking that is kind of a result of a division that matchmaking, you don't really have a choice but for it to be wonky at times.
No, and I guess that's part of this is we're looking at the main event we have this week. Give me Jerry Cannonier every day of the week over that.
Yeah. All right. We got 3 more to get through here. Next one on the docket is Rob Font versus Kyler Phillips, going to fight at UFC Vegas 99 on October 19th. I do not believe that is the main event. I believe that is just a fight on that card. But
which card was this? I'm sorry.
This is October 19th, UFC Vegas 99. Also, just a second. We're so close to UFC Vegas 100. Are they going to put out a banger? Are they going to put out a banger in the Apex for UFC Vegas 100? I'm interested.
So far, we have 2 fights that have been announced. I'm just pulled up the UFC Vegas 100. Luana Pinheiro versus Jillian Robertson, and Miles Johns versus Cody Garbrandt.
Whoa, this is a former champ right there. No, I'm kidding, obviously.
Hey, maybe. But they've also said the Sphere is about to be the best card they've ever had. And like you said, the first 3 fights, awesome. After that, it's
yeah, it's tough. It's tough. All right, this UFC Vegas 99 card is actually going to looking to be a decent card. Michal Pereira versus Anthony Hernandez in the main event. Mateus Nicolau versus Asu Amabayev, ranked flyweights on the card. Rob Font versus Kyler Phillips, ranked bantamweight. So 3 ranked fights on this card, assuming none fall off. So it's actually Robelis Desplain versus Austin Lane. Charles Johnson on the card. So it's actually a pretty decent card. Rob Font, Kyler Phillips. What do you make of Kyler Phillips getting Rob Font, who, you know, kind of feels like Rob Font, in my opinion, is going to fall into a gatekeeper role a little bit. They're 10 and 11 in the rankings, so it does make a level of sense. What do you make of this fight coming together?
Every division has its version of the gatekeeper. Bantamweight hasn't really had one. I thought maybe Henry Cejudo, but he wanted to fight higher up and was looking good enough too. So I think it's time, Rob Font, time to either knock out some of these younger guys and try and make a final push or be the gatekeeper to it. So, I mean, don't have too much excitement about this fight. I'll watch it. It'll be fun to watch, but to me, it doesn't matter all that much.
Fair enough. I will say bantamweight hasn't had a gatekeeper in a long time because it's just like a bunch of guys who are really, really good at MMA. It's like the guys don't stop being good. I think I'm a little bit more interested in this fight than you are, just because I was impressed with Kyler Phillips' last performance against Pedro Munoz. So I'm a little bit more excited than it sounds like you are, but you may be right. Maybe it doesn't turn out to be much, but I think it's a fun scrap. Interested to see what Kyler Phillips does in this one, because if he wins, I think we're looking, then you're getting into the Aldo, Yadong, Vera, Cejudo. So he would earn a big opportunity, I think, if he wins.
And don't get me wrong, Kyler Phillips was fun his last time, but for me, the issue with this is the Rob Font side of things.
Okay, fair enough.
I was at the Cory Sandhagen fight. He got laid on for 25 minutes. He's lost 4 of his last 5. all by decision. 3 of them were 5-round fights. One of them he missed weight. Lost to Jose Aldo. It seems like it's time for him to kind of disappear a bit or come out and do it, because Kyler Phillips will bring the fight to him like he did in his last fight. So maybe that gets the best out of him, and that's the hope I have. But I'm excited for Kyler Phillips' future once he gets past this fight.
Yep. Okay. That makes sense. All right. Next fight.
This fight could be very fun. It's just I think Rob Font's just a little boring recently.
Yeah, I'd agree with that then. Jose Aldo versus Mario Bautista next up. UFC 307, October 5th in Salt Lake City. I don't know why we're sending Jose Aldo back to Salt Lake City after the last Salt Lake City incident with him. Maybe they're just chalking that up to Marab being boring. But although it didn't look great last time he fought in Salt Lake City, still, Mario Bautista is a guy who, it looks like they're trying to use Aldo in that gatekeeper role. Just fought Jonathan Martinez. Now he's fighting Mario Bautista. Really interesting fight, in my opinion, because Bautista, well-rounded skill set, good grappler. Can you grapple Aldo? I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. Can he strike with Aldo? I don't know. We're going to have to see. It's just a very interesting fight, in my opinion, for a guy in Bautista who I was impressed with his last performance. That being said, I would much rather see Aldo fight guys like Rob Font, like Song Yadong.
Yeah.
He already fought Cheeto, like Henry Cejudo. So it's a weird fight that I like and dislike at the same time.
I'm with you. And the whole thing of what happened last time in Salt Lake, it was Merab used his grappling, kind of just held him up against the fence for the whole time. And Aldo looked like he just got tired and gave up. I don't want to see that same thing happen again, because if it does, I will be saying it's time for Jose Aldo to retire and head off to the PFL or Karate Combat.
Oh, he could probably kill somebody in Karate Combat.
Oh, he would. He would. Maybe bare knuckle, or I don't know.
That'd be crazy too.
God, Frankie Edgar versus Jose Aldo. I know it's a little bit of a weight difference, but could you imagine that fight in bare knuckle?
If Aldo's fighting in bare knuckle, we should do we should do bare knuckle plus leg kicks and just really get violent.
Yeah. But I mean, this is just a good addition to this card because, I mean, the main event. Are they doing anything else over the Raquel Pennington and Juliana Pena fight?
I don't know if that's going to be the main event or not, because it originally sounded.
I thought there was usually going to be another one, but
it was going to be Holloway and Topuria,
right.
But Islam hurt his hand, so they had to move the Holloway and Topuria to Abu Dhabi. So I don't know what they're going to do for Salt Lake City. Maybe it's just Pena and Raquel Pennington, which...
Oh, God help us.
Yeah.
Hey, it works out, though. They have Kayla Harrison fighting on this card as well. Assuming she beats Ketlin Vieira. Easier said than done. Then we have the easy next one to make. Honestly, just do it right after. Do a 4-woman tournament in the same night.
Let's get it all done the same day.
It's not like anyone's going to be that damaged up, I wouldn't think, after the first 2 fights. But, hey, there's that. I love the Movsar Evaloyev and Aljo fight. I think that'll be very interesting and kind of telling of what both of these guys are doing in this division and what they can do. Then the other one, Chris Curtis and Kevin Holland, just seems fun.
Yep.
So
that's a fight between 2 guys that are kind of doing the same thing, and I like it. So all right. Our last fight announcement of the day: Brandon Royval versus Tatsuro Taira, UFC Vegas 98 on October 12th. That is the main event. This is a massive fight in this division.
Down goes James.
Dude, I made it through 2 episodes in a single drop, and then here comes today, just all over the place. Anyways, all right. Tatsuro Taira versus Brandon Royval. Low-key a number 1 contender fight. Very important fight for this division, and I think it's going to be a good fight. I've been impressed with Taira. I like watching Royval. Every once in a while, you'll go, Royval, what are you doing? What are you doing, Royval? But overall, throughout his career, has been an exciting guy in this division. Two guys looking to earn big shots. Matchmaking makes a lot of sense to me.
Yep, rightfully so. I agree as well. I like Brandon Royval. He's a Denver guy, so always have Colorado roots pulling for him whenever he fights. But other way around, Tatsu Taira. Man. He's looking interesting. He only has one UFC fight under his belt. Come out, win this. Maybe he can be 3 fights to a UFC champion, which that'd be pretty quick.
I think he's got more than that, to be honest.
Has he been fighting? Has he fought? I might be wrong then.
6-0. 6-0 in the UFC.
Oh, okay.
So,
Who was the guy who just came over then? I thought a guy just came over.
Kai Asukara.
All right. For some reason, I thought he was in the flyweight division.
Yeah. Interested to see what they book Kai Asukara against. So we talked a lot about bantamweights today. Maybe he gets one of those. I think he's gonna fight a bantamweight. It sounds like so. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, as far as this fight goes, big fight, big opportunities at 125. So pretty good matchmaking.
I do have one more question for you just before we wrap it up. I know we're a little over already, but you brought up Islam Makhachev and his injury. Mm-hmm. Dustin Poirier recently came out.
No.
I know no to Dustin.
Yeah, go finish your question, but I'm pretty sure I know what you're asking, and the answer is no.
Poirier was saying they should maybe do an interim fight, and he would be interested. I have no interest in Dustin Poirier being in it, but would you be open to an interim title fight for Arman and someone else in this division?
Not really, to be honest, because who are we going to give the interim shot to?
Yeah.
Exactly. Is it going to be Oliveira, who he just fought? Nope. Holloway, I think, once again, a lot of people forget he beat Gaethje and is much closer to a title shot at lightweight than other lightweights. Mm-hmm. But he has a fight booked. Gaethje, like he just lost, recovering. Poirier just got an undeserved title fight that he lost, so we don't need to give him another one. Maybe we do Mateusz Gamrot if he beats Dan Hooker, but probably not. So I just don't see another guy right now that deserves that opportunity. And Islam has fought once already this year. Sounds like he could probably return before he even sits out for a full calendar year. So sounds like he can be back early next year, and I just think it'd be a little rush for an interim.
Yep, I agree with you. I thought Dustin Poirier was getting real desperate to have something wrapped around his waist. So I'm glad we're on the same page there, because I don't think there's any reason to. It's a clear number one guy who's fighting next. It's not like we have a couple guys that could all fight for the belt next if it happens. There's a clear number one, so no need to jeopardize that.
It also gives them some time to figure out the rest of this division, get some guys booked. Let's figure out if Poirier is retiring. We can match some guys up, move some guys up the rankings, move some guys down the rankings, move some guys closer to the belt, and kind of get a clear picture of where everybody sits in the division that is kind of clustered right now in a weird spot because so many of them have fought against each other in high-profile fights.
I'm kind of surprised. I'm looking at the rankings right now. Max Holloway's 9th in the rankings at lightweight. I don't get that. I know he's probably not fighting in lightweight again, at least not for a while, but he'd be the number 3 ranked guy. Shouldn't he be ranked at least in the top 5, if not?
Yeah, don't try and use logic, Jerry. You're using logic.
Right. What am I doing?
But yeah, it doesn't make any sense at all.
Dan Hooker, Arman Sarukian, interim. There we go. I've got my logic back.
Yep. All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. We got through quite a bit, actually, today. I know it's a little bit of a longer episode, but we ran through all of UFC Abu Dhabi main card. We did it actually for what this weekend's card is looking like. We did a decent preview for that, and then we talked about a lot of fight announcements. So, plenty for today. Thank you for tuning in with us through a lengthy episode. Thank you for working through my phone tipping over twice. Record setting. Let's try and not do that again. But thank you for working through us today. And like I said earlier, if you want more on UFC Vegas, Spivak versus Tybura, I don't know why you would, but if you do, I'll have the preview up later this week, and I will have best bets up later this week. If there are any, there may actually be none. We'll find out. I haven't wrote the post yet, so we'll find out. But thank you for tuning in. Make sure to like and subscribe. Make sure to tune in next week when we preview UFC 305, which is a fairly fun pay-per-view between Adesanya and Duplessis. We'll see it.